Hi, everybody.
Hello. Okay, let's dive right in. I think as a fun fact for the audience is the three of us have all known each other since we were in high school.
Yeah.
So I think first let's talk a little bit about how the two of you met and how you started to collaborate on this project.
This is me. I'll turn it over to you. This is an origin story that you've told a few times now.
And it's cute. So there's a wonderful organization run out of Miami called the National Young Arts Foundation, of which, that's right, Young Arts Foundation. And we were all finalists in different, or winners, finalists in different disciplines. I think yours was it spoken word or was it poetry? It was poetry. And Conrad's was a music composition. And throughout the week, you get to see your colleagues from other disciplines perform. And on the final night we're there, Conrad gets up. I don't know who Conrad is. And he says, I've written this piece that is meant, it's a suite of works that's meant to distill what love feels like. And I went, that's disgusting. Give me a break. We're 17. This is ridiculous.
I don't think your impulse was wrong.
No. But then I proceeded to really enjoy the work, and I said, damn, that was really good, despite the awful, awful prompt. And then, at the end of the concert, the song Whip My Hair by Willow Smith had become the young people were like, had become kind of a thing of the week, and Conrad overnight had orchestrated for a very bizarre group of classical musicians a full arrangement of Whip My Hair by Willow Smith. And it was also great. I said, okay, I'm sold on this.
There was a recorder in that arrangement.
There was a recorder solo.
No. Yeah.
And that's, yeah, and then from that moment I said I wanted to work with Conrad, and about 6 years later we find ourselves here.
Yes, indeed.
So, I will always remember that arrangement of Whip My Hair. Moving forward to the present day, let's get to the piece. And talk about some of the goals of that piece. I think there's so many striking decisions that the two of you has made as collaborators, and let's unpack some of that. We have to ask, why the sand, you know?
So sand, I believe, was part of our very first conversations. I think you came to me with this in mind, and what I remember most from our earliest conversations was a feeling of kind of lightness and a sense of uplift and lyricism. I think you had mentioned specifically, you know, wanting to externalize the lightness and beauty that you feel as a dancer on stage in a medium that is often seen through the lens of virtuosity and excitement and percussiveness in this very, very specific notion of percussive, like things hitting things. And you wanted, we talked about trying to think of percussion melodically and lyrically and just trying to get to this slightly more I don't know, light, up, floating place.
Feels, it was kind of actually a pivotal moment. I heard Jacques D'Amboise, who's a legend in the dance world, primarily known as a ballet dancer, speaking about what it feels like to be a ballet dancer. And he said, oh, when you're a ballet dancer, you're up in the clouds and everything is perfume. And I said, I feel the same way about being a tap dancer. I feel when I do tap dance and Lindy Hop, I feel that kind of lightness, that kind of transcendent beauty, but it's more frequently described as cool, hard-hitting, energized, high voltage, what have you, the things that you would use to describe like a rock and roll concert. And I was kind of more interested in finding a way to really articulate that feeling, that kind of lightness, that kind of, that floating amongst the clouds, that perfume, without losing the kind of the weight and the bass of what I feel in the dance. But also, this was just the first excerpt, but this music is very different than what you usually see jazz dance traditions done to. And so I've done a bit of solo experimentation with sands, but nothing of this scale, I hadn't experienced anything like an ensemble sand dance work. And it's so far proved so exciting and complicated and frustrating but primarily just really rewarding because it opens up not just new physical possibilities because you have to approach dancing in a different way than when you have metal tap shoes, but it also opens up a whole new kind of sonic potential. In tap dance, you're looking for a short, plosive sounds, like the sound a clap makes, but you never get this sound. You never get a sustained note in tap dance, or if you do, the volume of it or the impact of it is far below what does. So that opens up a whole new world. Even when I just slid down stage, there's a sounds elements to it. You hear me slide down stage. That's really fun for me. So.
Well, I think we have to get back into the performance, but
yeah,
there's more to come, more to discuss.
Yeah, I think we're gonna actually maybe demystify one of our pieces.
Yes. So speaking of how this piece is unique for you, I'm going to talk a tiny bit about how this piece is unique for me. I have never written music for dance before. This is my first outing. But it doesn't feel like I've been writing music for dance. It's felt quite a lot like I've been writing music with dance. And choreography and composition are, of course, pretty much, I mean, you talk in terms of composition. So ultimately, we're doing very similar things, and it's been a really collaborative writing process. So that last little section that you saw with 5 tap dancers initially started out as an idea that Caleb sent me. Caleb sent me a video of a pattern, which we can demonstrate for you.
I guess. And also, Conrad's a world traveler, and I'm a local world traveler. And so, one of our goals was to always be in the room together as much as possible.
Yeah, I've been here the whole week.
But that's a thing. Composers are not always in the room, in rehearsal, 8 hours a day. They send things, and then you send them edits, and they send it back. Anyway, but this was part of our correspondence, part of our collaboration, where I sent Conrad this. And then I moved to a 6 feeling. And this is what Conrad sent back. This kind of one-for-one choreography, the composition, we wanted to explore very briefly and then move on to other things, more complex things, more difficult things. And then the next section went. All together now. Yeah, so.
Hooray for that.
That's one way we composed together.
All right. So I want to talk a little bit more about the process of creating this piece. As the audience has probably been able to see by now, Caleb, many of your dancers have varied backgrounds and not just strictly in tap. I'd be curious to hear a little bit of a breakdown of the different influences that are in this piece and why it was important for you to have such a varied cast.
Sure. These are, I guess first and foremost, these are just the people I really feel compelled to work with. And even if some of them don't exactly fit the mission statement of the company, if there is a mission statement for the company, that people are really beholden to. This group of people, as different as they may seem, all share a similar value. So I guess the three main traditions that we're utilizing to express something new are tap dance, vernacular jazz, and Lindy Hop. That means things that mean to make sound, things that have musical value but don't always make sounds when you dance and don't involve a partner, and things that also have a musical value but don't usually make sound and involve a partner pretty much always. So that actually, if you're talking about a toolbox for making a new dance work, that's a very broad toolbox, despite it being within the same, just hit myself in the face of the mic. Sorry. Yeah, they're all connected historically, but they all find a home together. And the great thing about doing them all on sand is that they all have about the same volume. So when you're used to seeing Lindy Hop but not hearing Lindy Hop in the way that you hear tap dance when you see tap dance, here the playing field is even. So what Nathan and Avita do when they dance their duet has as much sound, if not more, than when we tap dance. Yeah.
I think that's a great segue into my next question. When I was at rehearsal yesterday watching these pieces, I was going back and forth being like, okay, it's a percussion ensemble but with gestural elements, or it's a dance company but with a lot of focus on the sonic. And then I came to the realization that it's neither one nor the other, it's somewhere in between. And I think that that really reveals a lot about the two of you, and the way that you work behind the scenes to create that. So I'd be curious to hear from you, Conrad, what you've learned or observed through this process about being a mover, especially because you're such a physical player and I love to watch you play. And Caleb, what you've learned as a person who makes sound, and a little bit about the shared language that you came up with coming from two different places to discuss two media that have very specific vocabulary normally that may not, you know, go back and forth.
Totally. That's an amazing question. It's also like a terrifying one with too many possible paths, but we have like a red light that tells us when we've been talking for 5 minutes, so try to keep it concise. One of the things that I think is really interesting about working with percussive dancers is that as a pianist, there is some shared DNA. I mean, if you really want to break it down, there is a way in which the piano is a percussive instrument. Sound is produced on the piano primarily due to a mechanism of something hitting another thing. And yet our goal here was to create a kind of melodism and a kind of lyricism, and so I think gesturally, just observing the ways in which gesture has a very clear sonic imprint has been just thrilling as a pianist, because it has, honestly, it has shifted the way that I think about attack vis-a-vis like piano keys. More specifically, it's made me think a lot about release vis-a-vis piano keys and how much is expressed through the release of sound and not just the execution or the beginning of sound. And that's really come from this process. But another thing that maybe isn't explicitly gestural or sonic, but is more, again, compositional, has been working in this kind of modular, improvisatory, and flexible way has been really exciting. Because there are parts of this piece where we've been pretty deep in it, and I've been able to make like a musical shift based on something that I'm observing in the choreography. And I was just talking about this with Caleb at dinner, actually, but one of the great joys of that is like, we don't have to talk about all the details of what we're doing, because there is a shared vocabulary in which we're talking about what are the broader things in the piece, what are we trying to explore here, what's the mood, what's the vibe, and I can make my adjustments, and Caleb can make his technical adjustments, but that vocabulary, that technical vocabulary, does not have to be the text of the thing. It's scaffolding, it supports the thing, but the thing is something else. So that, working in this context has been really instructive in that, and it's really inspiring, because I think that that's something we could all stand to remember, which is that the technical vocabulary is scaffolding, it's not the structure underneath.
I think there's a lot of classical musicians who are shaking right now.
I'm not saying anything.
Yeah, and to be clear about the various levels of communication here, Conrad will make a change and I'll notice it, but I don't need to ask him about it necessarily. I hear it, I digest it. The dancers have great ears, they digest it, and we change our performance in big and small ways to accommodate. I mean, it's sometimes fun to be like, oh, I noticed you added that little thing there, and I'm smart too. But you know, like, I see what you're doing with your laptop, Conrad. But more importantly, I think that there are many ways to communicate that don't always have to be like a sit-down meeting where Conrad says, so over the course of the last hour of rehearsal, I've done this and that. That is slightly different than other composer or choreographer collaborations I've done. Particularly though, the idioms that I find myself working with have a particular musical feeling or a musical scaffolding that Conrad is not as
I don't know about it as much.
Yeah.
Yes, I've been learning, but it's, yeah.
You know, there's a particular way of building and breaking pattern in jazz music that of course has been pushed forward through the progression of jazz music, but I working in things from the swing era and earlier tap dance, which is kind of has my heart mostly, I really appreciate the very clear structure of early jazz music and how clearly the narrative is is created. And I think Conrad's actually just pushed me out because he's not really aware of any of that when he's thinking about what would be good for me to dance to. You know, the first thing that Conrad sent me as music to dance to was actually the last piece that you heard. And we had, you know, hours of conversation just kind of, you know,
we've been talking about lightness and all that stuff.
We were talking about lightness, and he sent that. And I said, okay, Conrad, that's not what I was expecting. But that challenge and that change, you know, I think definitely initiated new compositional and choreographic ideas in my mind. And as we go through the process, we also talk about the many different ways of communicating to each other and to audiences. We say, well, you know, compositionally, this is what's happening in this moment, or choreographically, this is what I feel is happening. From a performance, we actually don't talk about performance quite as much because we're interested in letting it.
We're thinking about form and shape and structure.
And then we'll say literally what's happening. Everyone is on stage. We're all twirling. Great. And then, but the many layers of that is what makes our piece, I think, well considered I hope, well considered from multiple angles. You know, if you're looking at this as a music piece, you get something from it. If you're looking at it as a dance piece, you're looking at it in a particular way. And if you're looking at it as a piece of theater or just as people in a room, and we're in light and you're in the dark, then there are many different ways to look at what's going on here.
I'm definitely struck by the rarity that it is to have access to the kind of honesty that comes with someone who doesn't speak the same language as you and just needs to communicate. And I feel that very strongly between the two of you.
That's a beautiful way of putting it. I'm going to steal that.
So this is the part of the conversation I think we're all the most excited about, which is talk a little bit about the more philosophical, thematic elements of the piece. So I wanted to start by talking about human connection. I feel like there's so much call and response and interaction in this piece, especially that opening moment with just the two of you that feels so intimate, almost like you're whispering to one another in the dark. But there's also definitely a current of disjuncture. I think for me that's most embodied by this duet with Nathan and Evita that we see, where they're in this kind of almost sexy tango-like embrace, but they have their fists up with the sand flowing through their fists. I guess I'm just wondering what it is that this piece is trying to say about human connection. You can sit with that for a second.
That's a huge question.
That sounds like a Conrad moment.
No, I'm gonna, no. Well, what I do want to say is that this is one of the kindest, Caleb is one of the kindest and most open and emotionally generous people I know, certainly one of the most emotionally generous collaborators I've ever worked with, and this is a crowd of very emotionally honest and earnest people. And it's really refreshing, and it's and I think that permeates the piece just because it was made in that kind of environment with those kinds of people. And I don't know, I really would like to leave this to you though, because you have Caleb has such a background and interest in social dance and speaks really beautifully about social dance, and I would love to hear you share that with people.
All right. Well, there's no thesis statement to this work. There are themes, and there are things that we feel when we perform them. But I think my favorite thing about non-verbal work, such as this, the dance thing, is that it's what you feel from it. I can tell you about some of the values of this group and how we've gone forward. We've definitely talked about this feeling of abundance, which is very rare. We're all very careful to guard the things that are close to us and the things that we care about, but this is a very giving group. You very rarely hear someone say, no, I don't want to do that, or I don't think that's right, and not out of fear of retribution, just because I think we all come in here with a desire to give to one another. There is something sort of metaphorical about letting go of sand into this box, but not saying, well, this is my sand and this is your sand and you keep your sand over there and this is my partner and I only dance with this person. You stay with that person. There are no sides. There are no teams in this work, which sounds really cute and all, but I think beyond that, there's this feeling of relationship to oneself that's evident usually when people are on stage by themselves, which happens relatively frequently in this work, considering that there are so many people in the work. There is something about the relationship between us and Conrad, who is a physical presence on stage as much as we are, although he is separated by 6 feet of piano. And there is something about our relationship to each other in the kind of complex forms that families and groups of people form, which I think just makes me emotional just thinking about it. Not because I'm sentimental, but just because I think we are all aware at every moment how nice it is to be in a room all together and to be sharing without the fear of losing. Or if we're losing, it's a good thing. That we're letting go is a good thing, is actually something that we talk a lot about in this work.
Letting go as like sharing and as contributing and acknowledging like a shared responsibility.
So letting go is transcending solitude.
Or at least like, I don't know, acknowledging, I feel as though, and it should be said, this is actually stuff Caleb and I don't talk about all the time. I feel like we're both kind of protective of our reads on the piece. And I think for me there's like an interest in aloneness and how I think some kind of aloneness is just a fact of life and is just kind of a shared condition, and that relationships are not inherited but built, and that a relationship is not just, okay, I have my stuff and you have your stuff and we just jam them together. But relationships are building a new thing and fostering a new thing, watering a new thing, nourishing. You have to take care of it. It's another thing that connection is like is tangible and palpable. And I feel like the way Caleb works with social dance, I don't know. It's very interesting to me because that's directly part of the work, because there's partner connection and there are these exchanges that happen, and it's very carefully designed, but it's also really spontaneous.
Yeah. This also isn't really a stretch for any of us in the group, because jazz dance and tap dance and Lindy Hop is more about the people than anything, actually. That's a value that all of those communities and all those traditions share. It's about the people, and we do steps because people before us did certain steps, and we communicate with a vernacular that is really tied to personal history, which is why any of you who have ever taken a tap class, I'm sure your teacher has impressed upon you. You don't know the name Steve Condos? Go look up Steve Condos. You don't know the name Jimmy Sly? Go, because we feel that if you don't understand if you don't have a sense of the people who did it, then you're missing something about the content that you're receiving. And I think that's very valuable. And I think also, this is my to value your body and to value yourself and to value the people in your life above material things and the things that you possess is sort of a radical thing in 2018, because we're buying things all the time, and I don't know, I could get into my Only Love Remains speech, but I thank you, Conrad, but I got one left. But yeah, I think there's something to that. These dances are built on people and generations of people. And we're here as the new people who do the thing, and
we like it.
And we like it.
And we really
like
it. Yeah.
I said to Conrad the other day, this would be really hard to do if I didn't like you, because it's hard enough to make new work. There's so many different facets to it. But I really like all these people. I'm sure you're tired of me saying I like all these people. They're great. You should talk to them after the show. I'm just babbling. Please cut me off.
Can we do one quick lightning round?
Oh, yeah.
I want to talk about joy in this piece and joyfulness, talking about how much everyone loves one another. I think it's very brave how openly joyful this piece is, and to genuinely see the dancers when you watch them, they're having an amazing time. And something about that seems not sentimental to me, but political. And I would be curious if there's a politics of joy that you're playing with in this piece.
Well, and a politics of joy, but also like a politics of pleasure. Because I feel like another important thing is that it feels really good. Like, I don't get to be on the sand, not yet. But it feels really good to be on this floor and to like drag across. There's a lot, and Caleb has talked to me about how the forms that he works in are often about feeling good. They're built on a tradition of feeling good. Swing dance, Lindy is built on like how that community is built around how good it feels. And so that I think that's like, for me, pleasure is always a political thing. And prioritizing it, but then thinking about how you prioritize it and thinking about how you can be like intentional with it. I think that feels urgent to me. I feel like, you know, and believing that it's abundant, and believing that it's not scarce, believing that there is plenty of it available, and the preciousness of it is not necessarily external.
That goes back to that idea of abundance. I love that.
Yeah, it's just because we talk about it a lot. I don't know. It's just on our minds a lot, I think.
There's just a lot of sand on stage, so we talk about abundance. Two quick things, because I know it's lightning round. One, for those of you who have ever stepped out on an autumn day and crunched on leaves, that's what this feels like, but like times 20 over here. It's just such a good feeling. Two, there's something funny about Conrad and I being relatively young and being professionals, where we feel like I felt this way for a long time, that I had to take myself super seriously, and then I totally flipped the switch, and then I went to like being like silly, which wasn't right either. But so finding that balance of joy, showing that like I'm happy to be alive, and I'm happy to be doing this. This is great. I have a great time every day. But also saying, but you should take me seriously and support what we're doing here, because it feels important to us.
Well, and it's not escapist. I think that's also, at least our goal is to hopefully not have it be, because it doesn't feel escapist. Yeah.
Well, I think what you're doing is building the joy into the scaffolding, kind of institutionalizing joy, if you will.
Oh yeah, I don't tell anyone to smile, ever. They just do it.
They're just happy.
Like, I'm not like, now this is, actually we never talk about...
We don't talk about performance stuff.
We don't direct emotion. We're not like, this is the happy piece. This is the sad one. Like, it just is what it is, and you laugh because you thought something was going to happen, and then it didn't, you know? Like when Naomi went to leave stage, and she's like, I'm going to stay. You know? So, I don't know.
Well, I'm being greedy with time, but thank you so much.
Thank you, Delali.
Oh, quick wrap up. Thank you to Works in Process, Duke and Caroline and Paul and Mary Sharp and everyone also at the Guggenheim Theater, who have made us very welcome despite bringing a lot of sand into the room. I should say, please look out for the tickets that will be available to the premiere on January 6th and 7th. Then it's going to chill for a little while through the first half of 2019, and then we're just saying this now, but it'll, for the first time, tell your friends, or not really, but we're going to have a week-long engagement at the Doris Duke Theater, Jacob's Pillow Dance Festival next summer. And that's very exciting for us because we actually started building the work on a very snowy week in the Berkshires in February of this year.
It was cold.
So yeah, thank you everyone.